There were two older men at the end of their life. They both reached 90, and they used to spend a lot of their time watching baseball games together and reminiscing about the days when they used to play. And unfortunately, one of the friends fell ill, and it was at that point it became obvious that this was it. He was now on his deathbed. He was in the hospital, and his friend decided, I need to go visit my friend and have one last conversation while time allows me to be able to do that. And he leaned over to his friend as he's obviously in his last moments to say, hey, I know this is it, but would you do me a favor? And his friend rolls over and says, yeah, you name it, whatever I can do, I'll be glad to do. He says, when you get to heaven, I need to know whether or not there's baseball in heaven. And so would you come back and let me know if there's baseball? And he said, yeah, I will do that for you. And it was only a few days later that he was abruptly woken up in the middle of the night. He heard a voice, and it was the voice of his friend. And he says, hey, by the way, I've got good news and I've got bad news for you. He says, what's the good news? He says, the good news is, yes, there is baseball in heaven. The bad news is you're starting pitcher on Wednesday. So, welcome to Harvest. The jokes are bad, but they're free. So my name's Lee, and I'm glad to be with you today. And if you're new with us, special welcome to you. I love to hang out in the lobby. Stop by. If we haven't met before, I'd love to be able to just greet you and get to know you a little bit. We are wrapping up a series on the end times, and we've been taking the last several weeks just kind of gaining an understanding, kind of looking at the word pictures that the Bible gives us about how all things are going to come to the end. The first week of this series, we talked about the fact that Jesus is coming again and that there's great hope for us in knowing that. Then we talked a little bit about some signs. We talked about that there'll be an age of tribulation, a time of lawlessness and people of lawlessness and this Antichrist figure. And then last week we took some time and talked about judgment and what we can expect, both that there's a judgment for Christians, those that have placed their faith in Jesus, and what does that mean? And then there's a judgment for those that haven't placed their faith in Jesus. And at any point, if you missed any of those, I want to encourage you, grab those. They're online. They're on our social media account as well. Now, today, can't think of a better conversation for us to have than just, let's talk a little bit about heaven. Heaven is one of those things that particularly I think there's a lot of confusion around. And I think there's a lot of confusion around it simply because we get distracted and we hear all kinds of different thoughts and processes about what heaven will be like. Now, next week, we're going to start a brand new series you saw called The Stand. And we're going to be taking a look at specifically what does it mean for us to take a stand for truth? And how do we do that in our culture and our society? And so I want to encourage you, be here and be a part of that. But today, we're going to dive into talking specifically about heaven. So just in a moment, we're going to open up in our Bibles to Revelation chapter 21. Go ahead and open up your Bibles if you have your Bible with you today, to Revelation chapter 21. I'll get there in just a moment. I want to kind of set the table for us in this conversation. But I do believe that there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of time in our life that we actually don't give any thought or really any awareness to heaven and what heaven is going to be like. Why is that? I have a thought. I have a theory. I'll call it a Leism if you want to. In Isaiah chapter 14, you have this character named Lucifer. We know him as the father of all lies, the prince of darkness, Satan. He is one of God's people that's, has a high rank in heaven, but he rebels against God. He makes a deciding statement that he wants to be like God, and God's like, that's a position you can't have, and as a result, he was thrown out of heaven. Now, it wasn't just him, but a third of all the angels followed him. That's who we call demons today. Now, Satan, being the prince of darkness, being the father of all lies, he was in heaven. And so I believe that there's two main lies that he constantly is speaking to us to distract us from the reality of what heaven will actually be like. Because there's something that when there's something out there that we can align our lives by, there's something that out there that if it brings hope to us, it can really become a driver. It can allow us to keep walking. We can keep plugging away, even sometimes in the most difficult moments in life. And so if he can kind of creep in and change and deceive us of what heaven is going to be like, he's going to do that because that's when he can distract us. He can get us off course. The first lie that I think oftentimes a lot of us can buy into, if you're taking notes, go and write this down, is simply this lie that heaven can wait. Heaven can wait. In other words, there's no real urgency for heaven to actually become reality. There's no real urgency for us to look forward to what's going to be in that moment when we get to walk into the gates of heaven. Because I think sometimes we look at life and we sit there and we kind of go, man, can it get any better? You can probably think of moments throughout your journey where you could probably look at this moment in life and go, man, I don't know if life can get any better than this. This is phenomenal. This is great. I think about the birth of my kids. Being in the hospital going, wow, this is incredible. I don't know if it can get any better than this. Every other year or so, my family and I, we used to go to Yosemite National Park in California. And we just spend a week camping, and I go out and just do these lone solo hikes throughout some of the most beautiful country in the entire world. And I can remember being in these mountains, the trees are tall, walking and hiking by these just beautiful flowing rivers that led to just gorgeous waterfalls. And I can remember just pausing going, wow, can it get any better than this? And I think that kind of perspective causes us to sell heaven short. And oftentimes, we, as a result, we begin to live our lives in such a way that we're actually more about storing up treasure here on earth. We get more focused on today than on what is to come. In other words, our heart drifts towards today and what is now and what I can attain versus drifting towards things that are to come, the blessings of heaven. And a lot of it draws from this simple lie that we can easily buy into, this idea that heaven can wait. If we're honest, life can be a whole lot better. Psalm 84 talks about heaven in this way. It says, "For a day in your courts, O Lord, is better than 1,000 elsewhere." In other words, a moment in the presence of God is better than thousands of other moments elsewhere. Just a moment with God is better than the best days that we experience here. See, all the joys, the greatest moments of our life, those moments where we find ourselves going, man, can it get any better than this, are simply temporary. The greatest pleasures we experience here on this earth are just temporary. But in heaven, we will have the opportunity to experience pleasures that will never pass away. The second lie that I oftentimes find being told and bought into is this: the idea that most people are going to go to heaven. That most people are going to go to heaven. And sometimes it gets summarized in the idea, well, you know, we all basically believe the same thing. There's multiple paths up to the top of the mountain, and you just got to be genuine. You got to pick what you want. We're actually going to talk about that very specific thing coming out of Easter. We're going to be talking about what's the difference. We're going to walk through verse by verse through the book of Galatians, which really gives us a great point of view and understanding. Yes, there is a difference. Christianity is different than every other religion and thought out there. And we're going to explore that. So I want you to put that on your calendars as well. But Jesus talked about it from this perspective. This is from Matthew chapter 7. He simply says this. It's going to come up here on the screen. It says, "Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy. That leads to," where does it lead? "To destruction. And those who enter it by it are many." And he says, "For the gate is narrow, the way is hard that leads to life. And those who find it are few." So there's really two choices when it comes to life. There's one way that honestly most of society, most of culture, most people are actually walking on. The gate is super wide. It's easy to find it, and it seems easy, but in the end, it's just going to lead to destruction. But he says then there's a path. It's very narrow, and it's hard. It's not the easier path. There are going to be things that are going to cause you to stumble. There are going to be things that are going to cause heartache. But in the end, if you stay on it, it leads to life. And then it's no coincidence that Jesus then talks about the fact that he is the way, the truth, and the life. That's the narrow path. As much as it may put us at ease in thinking about, man, oh yeah, most people are on this trajectory, the reality is that's just not true. We actually talked some about that last week when we talked about judgment and what that looks like and why that is even necessary. But let's do this. With the remaining amount of our time this morning, I want us to actually take a look at what the Bible tells us and how it describes heaven. It gives us a great glimpse. Now, the reality is this is a very, very challenging conversation to have and very challenging to be able to do in 30 minutes. Because, let's be honest, we could do an entire spring series just on heaven and just barely skirt the conversation. And so bear with me, we're going to do a quick flyover and trying to understand a little bit about heaven and why this needs to be something that helps drive our lives. It becomes a perspective. I mean, Paul talks about heaven from this standpoint in the way that our lives here should engage the thought of heaven. He says this, he says in Colossians 3, if then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. In other words, he's saying, when it comes to living life, when it comes to us walking day by day by day through the drudgery and the mundaneness of what our world throws at us, he says, you need to set your minds not on this world, but on heavenly things. And he says you are to set your minds in such a way. The meaning behind what is written there in Colossians 3 is focus in on such a way. Focus so hard on things that are to come, the things that God is going to bring, what heaven is going to be like, that it actually captures your affection. That your heart leans that direction. Your heart shifts that direction. Not about gaining earthly treasures, but it's more about us focusing on those heavenly treasures. Why? Because those are the things that will energize you. Those are the things that keep you going. They motivate you. They help define purpose. They give you a reason to actually say no to all those temporary things in our world, so that we can actually invest in things that are going to last forever. Let me kind of explain it this way. All joy is derived from God. All of it. For those who follow Jesus and have entered into a relationship with him, even for those that haven't chosen to follow Jesus and entered into a relationship with him, all of their joy is derived from God. I mean, you could simply kind of sum it up this way. When there's no God, there's no good. No God always equals no good. James chapter 1, he says it this way, every good and perfect gift comes from above. However, sometimes we tend to pattern our lives after things of this world and not who God is and what God is wanting to do in our lives. We don't necessarily pattern our lives after the one who is the giver of all good things. And as a result, many times we can walk through life looking for good, trying to attain what is better. We want the blessing, but we want the blessing without the blesser. Don't expect for a moment that you can truly have good without God. The reality is it is impossible to have good without God. See, heaven used to be one of those things that I would classify, it was the North Star for Christians. In other words, it was that thing that many Christians, church, would orientate their entire lives around. It would help them navigate life. Help them navigate those moments of despair those moments of anxiety, those moments of depression, this thought that this world is temporary and we have something far better to look forward to, was the thing that allowed them to navigate those moments. And it brought great strength to people in midst of even persecution. I don't know if you realize that Christians today in our world are there are more persecuted Christians today than any time in our history in the church. We don't usually feel it here. We're blessed to be able to come to church freely and worship in our freedom. But I've literally sit across the table from pastors that saw one of their pastors chopped up and put into a 5-gallon bucket. What gets you through those moments? I can remember sitting there and having this conversation with them, and they looked at me and said, "Lee, if God would just only give me the opportunity to die like him, oh, what a blessing that would be." Probably one of the most humiliating moments in my life. Because I realized at that moment I had a whole lot to learn about my own faith. What drives you to be able to say that? What drives your faith to be able to utter that kind of thing? It's the hope of heaven that allows you to face ongoing persecution in your faith. However, over time it's become easy for humanity, and I would say even into the church, the buy into the notion that if we just work hard enough or if we work smart enough, we can bring heaven to earth. But you and I, we don't have the power or the capacity to actually do that. And it's not for lack of trying. We just can't do it. We can't fix the world. But Jesus will. And he will fix it in such a way that it will never break again. The world is not in desperate need of you and I fixing the world. The world is in desperate need of Jesus fixing the world. And when he fixes it, he will repair it, he will redeem it, he will restore it. Jesus, the carpenter, is the one that will do that. We can't fix this world, but Jesus can. And as you read through the Bible, there's actually 3 different ways in which heaven is actually interpreted or translated. I just want to give you a quick overview and kind of help us understand where we're going to focus in this conversation. The first use of the word heaven you'll find in the Bible is what is kind of described the atmospheric heaven. Atmospheric heaven would be where thunderstorms happen. That's where our airplanes fly today. That would be atmospheric heaven. The second heaven, kind of layer of heaven, you could put it that way, is the celestial heaven. Celestial heaven would be where the stars, where the sun, where the planets all exist and live in orbit. It's getting in a spaceship and heading into space. The third kind of layer of heaven that you'll see described in the Bible is what we would dub the dwelling place of God. This is actually what most people think of when Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians, this idea of being in the third heaven, is this dwelling place of God. Now, what I want us to understand is we kind of even break it down into different portions of this. Because there's what we would classify as present heaven. What kind of theologians today have dubbed that this is the intermediate state for believers right now. Kind of pre the conversation we talked about, Jesus coming again, judgment taking place. So before all that happens, where do believers go? Because Philippians chapter 1, Paul talks about that to depart this world, to depart my body, is to be in the presence of Christ. This is what will happen when people die, and that's what many people believe, that this is the heaven that we know of right now. A beautiful place where people dwell in the very presence of God. But one day, what we need to understand, this is the passage we're going to take a look at here in Revelation 21. One day, God is going to bring about a new heaven and a new earth. He will create a new heaven and a new earth. Let's take a look at this, the description that we're going to read in Revelation chapter 21. Go and follow along with me here. It says, then John talking, he's recording again in the book of Revelation, he's recording this vision, this interaction he has with God about how things are going to come to an end. So he's recording this perspective of the new heaven and new earth. He says, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God. Then I love this description. It gives us an understanding of the interaction that will take place with God. It says, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have now passed away. Let me just pause there for a moment. I have a son that's 4, and Joshua is all about trains. If you've had any type of interaction with him, it's very obvious, because probably the first question he'll ask you is, do you have trains? He oftentimes is carrying a train. It doesn't matter if we're at the ball fields, it doesn't matter if we're at church, if we're going through Walmart, he probably has a train with him. And if he was told not to have a train, he's probably hidden one in his pants somewhere. That's Joshua. He loves trains. He has one specific train that he's had for a long time, and it's ragged. I don't know how else to describe it. It's about this big. It's just a plastic little train. The batteries, you can put new batteries in it. It doesn't work. Most of the pieces on that train, it's broken. The side truffles have all cracked, and they're separate pieces. The wheels are falling off. You know, the little gate on the front of it that shoved cows off the tracks, like that's broken. I've had to screw that in multiple times. Now, here's the funny thing. He loves that train. He probably plays with that train more than any other train in our house. And I'll tell you this, we have a lot of trains. He'll sit on it, he'll ride it around, but the thing is, it's constantly broken, and he gets fixated on the fact that this isn't operating right, that something's wrong with this. And he's always constantly fixated and begging me, Dad, can you fix this? Dad, can you fix this? Dad, can you fix this? And for some reason, I don't know how, I don't know why, he thinks that Scotch tape can fix everything. And so he's like, Dad, just tape it. Just tape it. Tape the wheels on. Tape the hook on. Tape the truffles on. Would you just get the tape? And I'm constantly going, buddy, tape ain't going to do it. No, it'll work. And he'll get in an argument with me about it. You know, like, no, it'll work. Dad, it'll work. No, Joshua, it is broken. I can't fix it. As best as I can't change the reality of this. In my mind, I'm looking for a new one right now on Amazon, and I'm going to take it, his old one, and we're going to have a burial service for it. And then I'm going to bring out the new one and say, surprise, you know, and hopefully that goes well. I don't know if it's going to go well. But here's what I want us to understand. He is all about redemption. God is all about restoration. When something is broken, he doesn't come at it with Scotch tape. When something is broken and it is placed in his hands to be fixed, he doesn't get it fixed, he makes it new. All the things that are broken in our life, all the things that caused us anxiety, all those things that cause us despair, all the things that cause us heartache, all of those things, he's not just about fixing it, he's about making it new so it's not even a problem. Guys, that should stir a fire in your heart. This is our God. This is how he loves us. It's not just about fixing. It's about making all things new. Heaven will be restored. Why? Remember we talked about earlier, there was a massive rebellion that took place in heaven. Long time ago. A third of the angels were thrown out. God is about redeeming what was lost. He's about making new that which was broken. And so we will have a new heaven that he is going to bring and usher in. The earth is restored. Why? Sin and evil have reigned here. They have broken everything. And he's going to make it new. Our bodies will be brought back and made to perfection. If I can't get an amen on that one, you guys are dead. Like, come on. I don't know about you. My muscles hurt. My joints hurt. I'm tired of setting off every alarm when I go through an airport. I'm ready to have that new body. Like, I can't wait. And I know for a lot of us, we're probably wondering, I wonder what my superpower will be. I can tell you right now, I'm going to fly. Like, I can't wait for that. But he's going to make our bodies new. This idea of a new Jerusalem coming down gives us this hope and understanding that culture in and of itself will also be redeemed. Our culture's messed up. Our culture is broken. Our culture doesn't know which way is right and which way is left. It will be made new. It'll be made right. It will be made perfected. See, Satan never foiled God's plan. If we miss this, we miss the fact that God is one who actually keeps his promises, the very promises that have been revealed to us from the beginning of Genesis all the way to the end of Revelation. He is a God that keeps his promises. The second thing that we can look forward to about heaven that it talks about here in this passage is that there will be no more pain or the causes of pain. There will be no more pain or the causes of pain. And I love the perspective that we get in verse 4 that he is a God. He is so personal that he interacts with us at a level that when we cry, he wipes away the very tears from our face. And then it's not about just continuing that action. He rids us of all the things that cause us pain. They're gone. All those things that cause heartache have been dealt with. They've been judged. They've been cast aside. And everything has been made new. I don't know about you. My kids teach me things about life, and I think about God all the time. I don't know if there's anything more difficult as a parent than to watch our kids suffer. To watch them go through challenges, heartbreak, physical pain. Incredibly challenging. But there's these really special moments in the midst of their pain. Even as they age, you see them come around, maybe they crawl up in your lap and they just want you to be there, to be present and to hold them and to reassure them it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. I want us to see that our interaction with God is going to be like that. He is that personal. I don't know what your experience is. Maybe for some of you, your experience of a father or your experience of a mother have been rotten. God is the perfect father. No matter what your heartache, no matter what your pain, no matter what your doubts, you can crawl up into his lap, you can let loose, you can cry all that you want. He's going to make sure you understand it's okay. I'm here. I've taken care of everything. And all that pain has been wiped away, and all the causes of future pain are now gone. That we will experience in heaven. That's an incredible, incredible thing when you begin to ponder that and think about it. The third thing is that God will dwell with his people. God himself, almighty, holy, meaning he is set apart. There is nothing like him. Chooses to dwell among his creation. Chooses to dwell among you, humans. God doesn't need a place to dwell. He's what we call omnipresent. He's everywhere. But because of his love, because of his compassion, because of his heart for you and for me, he makes a conscious decision to actually dwell among his people. This idea of a throne represents God's physical presence among his people in the city. God is the essence of heaven. Because without God, there's no heaven. The greatest gift that we get in heaven isn't the fact that all our pain is gone, isn't the fact that we can eat everything that we want and we don't grow fat. Those aren't the greatest blessings of heaven. The greatest blessing of heaven is God. And we get to live with him. I can't imagine what it's going to be like to stroll by the crystal clear waters and to be able to talk with God. Hey, tell me about this. Tell me about that moment. Just trying to understand a little bit more of his heart and what has driven him to do all the things that he's driven. To just spend that moment in worship of him. Friends, heaven isn't going to be boredom. It's not going to be boring. Boredom is actually a glimpse of hell. It's a place of no purpose, of no good, of no God. This world, I want you to understand the breadth of this. This world is the closest that any unbeliever will ever get to experiencing heaven. This world, for those who have made a conscious choice to follow Jesus, is the closest you will ever actually get to hell. That's why we say it here at Harvest. We are a church that's about helping people come to know and follow Jesus. Everybody matters here because we want people to experience the joy of what it's going to be like to be with him for all of eternity. And again, that's a long time. At the end of this series, I can't think of a better moment than for us to just pause and let's focus in on Jesus. He's the one that's made all of this possible. He's the one that's given his life so that you and I can know life. He stepped into our world as messy as it can be. He showed us what perfection looks like. He showed us what it means to love. And he did it flawlessly. And then he walked to the cross. He gave his life, undeserving of it. The Bible talks about it that he took on the wrath of God for our benefit. And then he rose again from the dead, breaking free of those bonds of death, breaking free of the bondage of sin, so that we know that there is hope. There is more beyond this life, something that we can look forward to. So in just a moment, we're going to take communion together. Ushers are going to come forward in just a moment. They're going to pass a plate, and on that plate's a cracker and a cup of juice. There's nothing magical, there's nothing mystical that takes place when we take those, but it's just deeply symbolic for us as followers of Jesus. It's something that the church has done since the very beginning. Jesus established us as a representative of his new promises, what it means to be a part of his family. And that we're to do this to remind ourselves, in other words, as kind of a memorial ceremony of who he is and what he has done, the hope that exists on the other side of this, where we couldn't do it on our own. We couldn't live good enough. He came and established a new way, and he brought into it forgiveness. And I recognize in a room like this that there are a number of you that maybe you walked in, just you're looking for answers. You would self-describe yourself as being on a spiritual journey. First of all, we're so glad you're here. But I would hate to ever ask you to do something that meant nothing to you. And so feel free as the ushers pass the plate and just pass that along and allow the person next to you to grab that. But here's the thing. I want to challenge you to do this today. I want to challenge you just where you're at. Just say, God, would you reveal yourself to me? And I believe God will answer that small, simple, yet profound prayer in your life. But for the rest of us, this is a moment for us to just pause and reflect on the power of Jesus and what it means that we have a God that is a personal God. We have a God that is our Savior. Bands can come and lead. Feel free to join in that moment. I'm going to ask that you just hold on to the cup, hold on to the cracker, and I'll come out and we'll take those together.